Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Being Real podcast. Before we get started with today's show, I wanted to let you know that due to some technical issues, this episode is available in audio format only. For our YouTube viewers, that means you'll hear the full conversation just without the video. Thank you for understanding. Enjoy the show. Welcome to the Being Rare podcast, where we talk about navigating life with rare disease. I am Sarita Edwards, wife, mom, award winning advocate, nonprofit founder, and CEO, and your host. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Being Rare podcast. Today we are joined by Royce Robertson. Royce and I had the pleasure of connecting on social media, and we had a conversation. And after that conversation, I realized that we had a lot of things in common, from his diagnosis to his mission and his passion regarding just equitable access to care. And so I started stalking your page, and I saw a lot of stuff that you did in support of your diagnosis, and really just making sure other patients and families have access to care, because just lived experience, the complexities of what that can look like. But before we jump into that, which was truly interesting to me, I want you to kind of give the viewers a little bit of your backstory. How did you find yourself here? How did you get your diagnosis? What symptoms brought you to uncovering the diagnosis that you have? And then share with the group what that diagnosis is.
Sure, sure. It's a kind of a long and winding story, so I'll give the high level milestones here, and we can go from there and kind of dig into places where it seems most appropriate for the listeners. In 2016, in the summer of 2016, I started getting lightheaded, and it would be a really quick white fuzz sensation. I'd get flush. My vision would kind of blur in and out, and it happens once, and you kind of say, "Oh, I got up too fast." It happens twice, three times, four times, and the next thing you know, you're intentionally increasing your water intake, or you're cutting things out of your diet, or you're doing online research to figure out what causes these things. And lightheadedness is a pretty broad symptom. So it kept getting worse, and I kept hiding it. I didn't tell anybody about it, and then finally, after about 3 months, I was up to maybe 4 or 5 times a week, and my wife found out, and she and she said, get your rear end to a doctor before I drag it there myself.
Yeah.
And so I did. I went to my primary. They referred me to a cardiologist, and they originally said to me that when I had my first EKG at age 43, uh, they said to me, "You have a right bundle branch block," and I was like, "Okay, cool. How do we treat that?" And they're like, "No, no, no. That's a symptom of something else." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, more symptoms." And so I went into a battery of testing, and I mean, you name it, treadmill stress test, nuclear stress test, bubble test, all of these different cardiac tests, and then an echo. And then one day I was walking into my house with, 2 bags of Trader Joe's groceries, and my cardiologist calls, and he says, "You have to come in right now. You're at very high risk, and we're going to implant a defibrillator in your chest. You have what's called arrhythmogenic right ventricular dysplasia." And I had no clue what that was. And I started immediately Googling all of it. And you know how bad it is when you just start Googling things.
Yeah.
And so I went in and got a defibrillator. There was a big adjustment for me. It was, within 90 seconds, my life changed.
Yeah.
And that phone call. And I spent pretty much that January, February, and March just kind of stewing over not being the same as I was, and I was kind of living life believing that I had a genetic disorder that then started getting me worried about my daughter. And my wife and I have a now 18-year-old daughter. But I'd also at the same time I was doing all this genetic testing. Our next door neighbor was a genetic counselor, and she said, "Well, if you don't mind, give me all your results, and I'll start looking deeper into it." So we gave her the results, and she said, "You know what? I know the person at Johns Hopkins hospital in Baltimore who is, and they have an ARVD, arrhythmogenic right ventricular dysplasia, clinic, and they're like the best place in the world for this. So, do you mind if I send their stuff down?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure, whatever. If more, the more we know, the better." And Hopkins got back to me within, a couple of days and said, "We want you here. Come on down
Wow.
anytime."
Yeah.
So within a week or two of that, I was at Johns Hopkins, and they said, they did a full workup on me, and they said, our first step is to do a mapping and an epicardial ablation. And so we scheduled that for April. It was right after my 44th birthday. Went down to Hopkins for that epicardial ablation. They said that it would take about 4 to 5 hours for the procedure. Well, I woke up in the recovery bay in within 90 minutes, and I was like, what happened?" And the nurse told me that the surgeon aborted the surgery, and they would be in a minute to kind of tell me. So the surgeon comes in and says, "You actually don't have ARVD. You have cardiac sarcoidosis, which is an autoimmune disease." So once again, in 90 seconds, my life changed. And I went from being a genetic disorder guy to an autoimmune guy. Equally rare. Both of them are equally rare. And but I was so grateful that I had been in the care of world-class physicians who could recognize that. And had I received that ablation, I wouldn't be here talking to you today. It's that simple. So that's kind of the, let's say, getting to the let's say the climax of the story. From there, in 8 years, I've had 5 heart surgeries. I've had a thoracic surgery that has stopped the fight or flight response between my brain and my heart. I've been shocked by my defibrillator 8 times, and the amount of anxiety that goes with being, their shock anxiety is a real thing. I think if I had to rank the things I worry about my wife and daughter, and I worry about getting shocked. Then everything else is a distant third place.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
so it,
Yeah.
it has a lot of emotional, mental and emotional wear and tear on you, from knowing that at any minute, if something goes haywire, you're going to receive, 650 volts of therapy.
Yeah.
That's kind of, yeah. I love that they call it
Wow.
therapy. There's
Wow.
not a lot about it that's therapeutic in the
Right.
traditional definition, and so all of this time in 8 years of all of this kind of, let's say, multiple tentacles of physical, emotional, uh, pain and suffering, and and complexity. Um, my wife and I were going back and forth from Johns Hopkins. I've been down there in 8 years, I think 50 times, 50. And that includes gas, that includes food, that includes hotels, and we're not staying at the Ritz.
Right.
We're usually finding a, whatever reasonable hotel I can find for under $100. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and then the time away from work.
Hmm.
My wife has had to take days where they were uncompensated because it
Yeah.
exceeded her personal time, things like that.
Hmm.
So all of that
Hmm.
combined, we estimate that we've probably spent about $35 to $40,000 traveling back and
Wow.
forth to Johns Hopkins. Um,
Wow.
and so there's financial burden that
Yeah.
goes with being a
Yeah.
rare disease patient as well.
Hmm.
And so I have in the last 8 years, you know, without going down into too many of the stories and things like that,
Hmm.
I've learned to respect very much the individuals who have rare diseases,
Yeah.
those that are living undiagnosed, those that have added complexities in their diagnosis and their treatment. And when you kind of look at a general, let's say, wheel of wellness, you've got all these aspects of wellness: spiritual, financial, physical, mental, social, all of those dimensions of wellness. I have I've just grown in kind of my appreciation for all of those, and how much I need to empathize with others in regards to all those dimensions of wellness when it comes to being a rare disease patient, because it can be unlike any other life. Um,
Yeah.
and it is uh, it's a fight worth fighting, I guess is the
Yeah.
best way to say it. So how's
Hmm.
that for a little bit of a background?
That is really good. That's really, really good. I think first I want to go back for just a little bit. As you were talking about your symptoms, you said that you were just kind of keeping them to yourself. You were hiding it. Was that just you thinking it was nothing? It's dismissive. Like, what prompted you to not feel like it was something worth checking out for yourself? Like, why did the wife, like always, I have to do that to my husband too. Like,
Yeah,
maybe it's time to go see the doctor. Like, was it just, I mean, was it just it's you tell yourself that it's nothing, because I think we all do that. I don't think I think sometimes we just assume it's a fluke and it'll pass.
yeah,
What was it for you?
yeah. I think it's a combination of things. I am I'm a go 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 person. I don't like it when kind of life gets interrupted.
Hmm.
And I think probably a little bit it was denial. And a little bit of that I'm 43. How could anything be wrong with me?
Yeah.
And I think a little bit of it was this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Once I find whatever it is to unlock it. Maybe it's
Hmm.
more maybe it's more hydration. Maybe I had a little
Yeah.
more, maybe a little more salt in my diet, a little less salt in my diet.
Yeah.
Maybe I got the wrong multivitamin. I don't know. I thought there was going to be
Yeah.
some like
Yeah.
cheat code that would unlock it, and then I wouldn't
Yeah.
be experiencing it anymore. And once I
Yeah.
came to the realization that nope, this is not going away,
Yeah.
that it was, then I took action on it.
Yeah. Yeah. So how much time had passed? You had about 3 or 4 episodes. Like, just how much time had passed between the
Yeah,
first one and the
so
fourth?
I had the first one in May of 2016,
Mm-hmm.
and then I finally saw a first doctor in September of
Mm.
2016. So I
Wow.
ignored it for about a little over 3 months,
Yeah.
and like I said, I was getting up to 3 or 4 episodes a week, and
Wow.
and so I would be, I'd get up from my desk at work, and I'd start to
Yeah.
walk across campus. I work at a college, and I'd get
Mhm.
halfway across campus, and all of a sudden I'd be like, stop and
Wow.
kind of feel a little dizzy, and then I just keep walking,
Yeah.
and sometimes I would be standing in the shower, and it would happen. Luckily it never happened while I was driving,
So,
and
yeah.
uh, and you know, and I say that now with a decent amount of guilt of saying that, hey, listen, it wasn't just about me. There's other people that are
Yeah.
around me that deserved having me be honest with myself.
Yeah. That's good. That's really good. Being honest with myself. Man, that's really good, Royce. Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard sometimes.
Um, it is. It's really difficult sometimes. And I know for myself, one thing that I always say is, talking about it and dealing with it, it makes it real. And sometimes you're not ready for it to be real yet. You know what I mean? And so I think
Yeah.
it's easy to just kind of dismiss it and act like it's nothing, because I think within yourself, that once you poke at it and deal with it, it's going to be something, and I'm just not ready for it to be something yet.
Oh yeah. I don't, as the old saying goes, I don't want those worms to come out of the
Yeah.
can,
Yeah.
but they have to.
They have to. They really do. You talked about you know, before reaching out to your neighbor, the genetic counselor, and then they're sharing your information with their connections at Johns Hopkins, it sounds like the healthcare team that you had really did their due diligence with the information that they had, with the knowledge that they had.
Mhm.
Um, you know, how how important is it, to continue raising awareness? Because had they begin to prep you for the same procedure that John Hopkins was able to prep you for but abort, you know, just thinking about the knowledge gaps, hypothetically, do you think your providers prior to John Hopkins would have realized and aborted that it was due to cardiac sarcoidosis? Or do you think, I mean, just hypothetically,
Yeah.
this is not bashing, just,
Yeah,
but
that's a great question. And I'll start it by this: is I feel no um, anger, remorse, animosity
yeah, yeah,
about being misdiagnosed
hmm,
because I look at the outcome. The
yeah,
outcome that I was, and here, little plot twist here. The outcome of being diagnosed with ARVD was that I received a defibrillator. And on June or January 2nd, 2017, that defibrillator saved my life because I was on
wow,
January 2nd, 2017, I started going into cardiac arrest in my living room. Uh, and so had I not had the defibrillator, again, I wouldn't be here talking to you today because common fact is that 1 in 10 people survive sudden cardiac arrest. 9 in 10 people survive it if they have the right device, and that device is set properly. So I feel fortunate, blessed
yeah,
to have my local medical team recognize a problem. It may not have been the exact problem because there's actually
hmm,
research in, this is the down. I teach research design to people, so like I read peer-reviewed articles all the time, so I know enough just to be dangerous. And so I'd start reading the articles on the misdiagnosis between ARVD and cardiac sarcoidosis, and it is actually a thing. It's
wow, yeah,
it's not as like say prevalent as like the misdiagnosis between COVID and the flu,
yeah,
but it is a thing, and so I don't have any kind of regrets or remorse about the the misdiagnosis. I I do look at it from a standpoint of hearing friends and other people who have just kind of reached out to me because of my journey, who have said things to me like, it took forever for my local doctor to believe that I had a problem, and just not
yeah,
dismissing it as some garden variety diagnosis, that it actually was some kind of rare diagnosis. I've heard that, a handful of times, a dozen times. And do I believe that some people are at a disadvantage because it takes longer and there's more turns to the journey in getting a rare disease diagnosed? Absolutely, I feel for them. Do I feel like getting them to a specialty clinic faster would be better for them? Absolutely. And so I look at it from a standpoint of that they're so and then I'll make this final comment and then wrap it up. I have talked to physicians, internists, friends of mine who have been in medicine for 25 or 30 years, and they said to me, A, I didn't realize that sarcoidosis was a thing. And B, I didn't realize that so few people had cardiac sarcoidosis. And so what that tells me is generally when we start talking about the diagnosis of rare diseases and the instruments used to uh, to diagnose those rare diseases, we've got a long way to go in terms of awareness, in terms of due diligence, in terms of kind of, let's say, freeing up the insurance process to make testing more tolerable for people's insurance, and just being able to pave the way for for people to feel like they have peace of mind in terms of their kind of, let's say, the data collection, and the testing, and then a diagnosis, and then treatment. It 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 still sometimes seems too much of a mystery,
Yeah,
and and that's
yeah.
that part frustrates me.
Yeah, yeah. And I just, I thought that it was so important to highlight, just hearing you talk about it today and then hearing you, talk about it when we talked previously. It really sounded like the providers that you had access to prior to John Hopkins, they were doing, all the right stuff. And I think sometimes when we think about misdiagnosis, I think sometimes it's looked at as if the proper steps weren't taken. And sometimes it truly is just a lack in knowledge, a lack of awareness about, what symptoms to look for, what things to associate and correlate and all the stuff. And so, um, I just, I just wanted to make sure to highlight that, um, it does not sound like, they were not concerned with your care. They just, they were just limited on their knowledge about what cardiac sarcoidosis
Yep.
is and what it meant in terms of what you were dealing with.
Yep.
Um, you talked about just the financial burden, and we know that's a reality for a lot of families. Um, you guys traveled from New York to Baltimore, I think is what you said in our pre-call.
Yep.
And you did that for years and talked about just the cost of that on your family. How did you guys really, like, how did you navigate that? We know that that's a challenge,
Yep.
and I know that you started cycling,
Mhm.
and one of the reasons you started cycling was to help other patients not have the burden of thought on how am I going to get care if it's not in my local area. And so I
Yeah.
just wanted to kind of tie that in. How
Sure.
was that for you guys? And then how did that experience lead you to caring so much to make sure other patients can get the care they needed?
Yeah, yeah. So a little bit of context. My wife and I were a dual income family,
Mhm,
so we're immediately, let's say, more fortunate than
mhm.
some others, and we have good insurance, and so that really helped because it lowered the out of pocket burden on us for procedures. So
Yeah, yeah,
copays were not as daunting
yeah.
as others. But as you know, insurance doesn't cover everything. Um,
Mhm.
and so there were a couple of times where we'd get a bill for $1,000 or something like that, and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
luckily those didn't pile up too
yeah,
much or too fast. But I'll be honest with you, we had to drain some savings, and
yeah, yeah,
and we had to live a little paycheck to paycheck
yeah.
at times, and we had to we had to rely on some friends and those kind of things. Um, the really where it went from kind of pay it out to pay it forward. For me, it was, we were paying out bills and paying out the cost of travel. And at one point or another, I said, you know what? I'm fortunate because I have these things. We're a solid dual income couple and we have insurance and things, but others are not as let's say as equipped to deal with this, and that may prevent them from seeking the treatment in the first place. You know, we know from just general heart disease information that women, especially women of color, are the most vulnerable to those, because what they do is they get in their mind that I can't interrupt life right now. I can't go to that doctor's appointment. I can't get that extra diagnosis. It'll keep me out of work. And if there's no work, there's no money. There's no money. There are all
Yeah.
kinds of, it starts the ripple effect. And so the, you know, the the part for me that just kept resonating was that if there's not an opportunity to help people get to high quality health care, then it, there's less likelihood that we're going to get ahead of the curve on sarcoidosis and on rare diseases in general, because people are just going to, if there's not a specialty or someone who can see you locally and be effective, human behavior is to just exist and not maybe not seek that, if it's too much of a financial burden, not seek it. And so in the summer of 2020, a colleague of mine and I decided that, it was dead center in COVID. There's no real reason why an immunocompromised person should be out in public. But I had cabin fever. I was really squirrely, and it was a beautiful summer. So a friend of mine and I decided that we were going to ride our bikes around every one of the New York State Finger Lakes. There's 11 of them. And it's like 311 miles total, and there's it's like 40,000 feet in elevation gain and things like that. So it's
Wow.
a challenging ride. They're
Right.
challenging rides. And what I started doing was I just started dedicating each ride to a person that I knew that was fighting some form of heart disease, whether it was
Mhm.
sarcoidosis or not. And one day while I was out riding, I just thought to myself, sorry, I just thought to myself that I could help others. And so that's when I started Cycle for Sarc, CYCLE number four SARC, Cycle for Sarc. And I've been raising money in conjunction with the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research, or FSR, raising money with them in order to make that dream come to life, where we would provide basically for all intents and purposes, they're grants. We would provide a grant to a person or a family that needs that money in order to travel for treatment or diagnosis. Like for me, I had a procedure. So I had just uncontrollable tachycardia, and it would cause my heart to just go out of rhythm at any time, and I would do what's called riding in the shadows, where my heart was out of rhythm, but my heart rate was not high enough or low enough to trigger my defibrillator. So I would just, wherever I was sitting, it would just be like a roller coaster. My heart, and just, my heart was fluttering out of control. But because my heart rate was only like 130, it wouldn't trigger my defibrillator. And I'd have to go into the hospital and get it pharmaceutically solved, they would have to get it back in rhythm through a combination of antiarrhythmials. Uh, and so the the procedure that I had, at one point or another, they said the best next, they can't continue to give me ablations. It's just not sustainable. So they said, well, what we'd like to do is we'd like to perform what's called a bilateral sympathectomy. As I like to joke, I didn't have my sympathy removed. I just had my sympathetic response removed, or they broke the sympathetic chain. And so I had the ganglia between my second and third vertebra severed, and much like just snipping the wire, it stopped the fight or flight response that goes between my brain and my heart, which then stopped my heart from kind of, let's say, sporadically going out of rhythm. Um, and and so that procedure, I was in Johns Hopkins for 12 days. And so, you can imagine the copay from that. But you could also then imagine that my wife wants to be there to visit and to make sure that I'm doing okay and everything like that. So you've got the mileage and the hotel and the food and everything related to, and I say this jokingly, it's 311 miles door to door from my house to Johns Hopkins. And, so 622 round trip, and the price of gas is not what it used to be. So all of those things add up, and every time I would pay one of those bills, I would think to myself, if there's someone who is struggling financially, more than I am, then then they need they may not want to do this because they couldn't afford it. So I don't ever want that to be the option. Um, so 2020 started riding the lakes, started making the dedications. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere, in some rural town in New York, I thought to myself, I'm gonna start doing this to raise money. And it's evolved. It's really evolved. And our motto is big rides, bigger mission. We don't do like the 5K or anything like that, or the short ones. This summer, this will be our third summer. My friend Jerry and I, we ride our bikes every summer, and this year we're doing the last 200 miles of the 750 miles of the Empire Trail in New York. So we will have gone from Buffalo to Albany, Albany to New York City, and this summer we're doing the Canadian border to Albany. It's 200 miles, and we'll start. We're raising money, and we'll see how much we can get for those 200 miles. And then next summer, we're probably going to do the C&O Trail from Pittsburgh to Washington, D.C. And we've got a bunch of other rides planned. But the mission right now is just keep pedaling, keep asking people to consider the cost of travel for treatment, and think about the people that they could be helping, from the standpoint that those rare disease patients deserve they deserve agency access, and the ability to go somewhere to get treated, that is not in their backyard, because the folks in their backyard might be, it's no offense to the physicians of America. That is a it
Yeah,
is it
yeah,
and the medical care community. It takes a lot to keep up on everything, and
yeah,
sometimes having a specialist matters. And
yeah,
so finding a specialist, getting those people to that specialist, and helping them with the let's say the hidden costs.
yeah, yeah. So how can people get involved with the ride? And first, you said it, but I made sure to write a note, and it's actually going to be the title of the episode. Big Ride, Bigger Mission. I love that so much. Um, I always love to hear when we take our own personal experiences and we try to figure out how we can use them to make someone else's experience better.
Yeah.
than it probably would be if we had not intervened. And so I love Big Ride, Bigger Mission. I think that that speaks a lot to the work that you're doing, alongside the foundation to raise awareness about sarcoidosis. My mother-in-law, and I told you on our call,
Yeah.
my mother-in-law, that was her diagnosis, sarcoidosis. I don't know, if it was cardiac or a lot of details about the diagnosis that she had, but I do know that that she had sarcoidosis, and that immediately that was our connection, before I even knew a lot about your story and the work that you're doing. So I appreciate the effort that you're placing to make sure families get the care that they need. So how can, in terms of the cycling, is it open to the public? Is it just you and your friend? How can people
Yeah.
get involved? What do you want people to take away from Cycle for Sark?
Yeah, the long term is to start doing some more, let's say, sign up for a ride.
Hmm.
I'm working with FSR, the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research, to really get a strategy on how they use cycling as part of their fundraising and support efforts. So there's even bigger rides and bigger missions along down the road, but right now it's essentially my friend Jerry and I. We do the riding, and we're just we try to encourage people to follow along with us or those kind of things. So the best ways to get a hold of me or to make a donation is number one, if you're on Instagram, you can go to Cycle for Sark, CYCLE number four SARC, Cycle for Sark. And the link to the fundraising page is there. You can follow what we're doing. I'm not the greatest at social media. Like so I've got to get better at kind of engaging people in this process. Um, but that's for my own. That's a some on my own personal checklist. But
Yeah.
you can also Google Team KISS, TEAMKISS. KISS stands for Kicking It In for to Stop Sarcoidosis, and that it's the first result in that Google search, and then you can look for Cycle for Sark from there, and you can also go to stopsarcoidosis.rallybound.org. And those are three ways to get to the kind of the donation page. Um, if there are folks that are listening that are also, let's say, want to work in partnership, if they are another rare disease person who not sarcoidosis, and they're looking to cycle to raise money, they're more than welcome. Get a hold of me. We can certainly look at different ways of collaborating, and if there are individuals that are listening that are part of other organizations that would benefit from or would are they that they care about rare disease patients who have to travel for treatment, also feel free to get a hold of me, because we're early on in this process. We're trying to build infrastructure, so that and some build some sustainability, so that that it's not just about raising the money. It's about building community. And
Yeah.
that's kind of it's so many people that have rare diseases need their people. They need
Yeah.
someone that they can
Yeah.
talk to, someone that they can call or text just for simple advice. Like I've had people that are up here, locally, that in Syracuse, that end up going to Hopkins, and they're like, "Where do you stay? Where do you eat? Where,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and have you ever been to, like, this woman asked me, she goes, "Have you ever been to the Elmer Eye Institute at Johns Hopkins?" I said, "No, I haven't, but I walk by it every time I'm going to mine." Like, I have to pass it on the way to my doctor's office, and so then they start asking questions like, "Where should I park?" And it's nice to have a network when you're
Yeah.
facing these things. And so I'm trying to be, be a hub in that network, trying to also be a voice for people that that often get overlooked.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's important, have you ever been here? Where do you park? I think those are really great examples of the power of community because, every question isn't going to be about the diagnosis. Every
Yep.
question is not going to be about the symptoms. Sometimes those questions are very practical, but they can make or break a visit for a person.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know for myself, I have to navigate a wheelchair for my son,
Yeah.
and so I may not have a question about a symptom or a treatment option. It may be what's the best place to park. What's
Yeah.
going to get me to the accessible entrance quicker.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And
yeah.
likewise, like I was on steroids for 6 years, and
Mm,
and they're not kind to the human body.
right.
And some strong one, like decent dosages as well. And
Hmm.
and so I'll get people who will ask me things like, like what did you do? Like they're worried about gaining weight.
Right.
And what did you do? And and during
Yeah.
that time I went on a very strict clean diet.
Hmm.
If it was it basically if it was processed, I didn't eat it.
Yeah.
And that, that helped me get through. And then they'd say, well, tell me a little bit more about kind of recipes and what you did and this, that, and the other. And I was on amiodarone, which is a really strong antiarrhythmial. I was on that for 2.5 years until till it, you get things from the medication that you take to get rid of the
Yeah.
thing you have.
Right.
And
Right.
so I ended up with a toxic thyroid as a result of taking amiodarone. But amiodarone also causes you to sunburn really bad, and things like that. So it's like people will ask me, they're like, "Well, what did you do to do X, Y, and Z?" And so it's just good to have. I'm not a doctor, or I am actually. I have an academic doctor, but as my daughter says, you don't save people.
Yeah.
Not that kind of doctor. And so it's not that I'm providing free medical advice. I'm just helping people, like, this is how I navigated the problem I faced. And I think people with rare diseases need those resources.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm going to beg to differ with daughter. You are saving people every single day. Like I just, the everything you're doing is saving someone somewhere. I get what she means, but you for sure are saving someone from something,
Yeah.
even if it's just the thought of how am I going to get things done. But I get what she means. I get what
Yeah.
she
No,
means.
she's my daughter.
Yeah.
She'll give me a hard time, at least a little.
I was just yeah,
If
yeah.
she's
I've got
not, I'd wonder what's going on.
what right? That's right.
Yeah.
Look, I have one too, and my daughter is 19, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, as we wrap up and we come to our close, my final question for you, Royce, is how are you and your health today? How is Royce today, and what would you like to leave the audience with?
Great. So everything has been going well for me. I went through the common treatment for sarcoidosis is to suppress the immune system
Mhm.
and taper on steroids.
Yeah.
And that usually helps to fight the inflammation until the body can do it itself. So I'm on my I just had like my 15th PET scan in January, and I'm on my fourth straight PET scan with no new inflammation, no
Yeah.
recurring inflammation. Uh, and uh, and so everything is good from that standpoint. I don't want to say that I'm in, kind of remission, because it's not necessarily let's say a real term in sarcoidosis world, but it looks like it's dormant at this point. I do have, some things that I navigate. I have steroid induced osteoporosis. And so I do, still have to go in for bone scans, and I still, make sure I keep up with my calcium supplements and and my fair share of yogurt. Um, and I do have, when I was first diagnosed, I was actually diagnosed with sarcoidosis mostly in my heart, but a little bit in my lungs and a little bit in my liver. And those have, those dissipated very quickly. But I do have some so what happens with sarcoidosis is that the white blood cells coagulate and they become what are called granulomes. And then when the disease recedes, those granulomes calcify. And so it's almost like it's kind of like body parts get acne. And then, after if you had bad acne, then sometimes you end up with some pox, or some blemishes and things like that. So the blemishes that are left behind are those calcified granulomes, and they're in my lungs. And there's not many of them, but what happens is I age and, breathe deeper, they embed further and further and further down into the tissue of the lungs, and then at some point or other they may be more complicated. But for the most part, I'm really in a kind of a dormant phase right now. I'm kind of, I try not to celebrate too much of that, but I'm grateful for where I'm at. I'm grateful for the health care that I've received. Um, and I guess if there was advice that I would offer, or some closing thoughts that I would offer, I think just kind of a quick summary of some things that I've already said, and that is, number one, be honest with yourself, about the symptoms that you're facing, and don't try to hide them, don't try to underestimate them, don't just try to tough it out,
Yeah.
get the help that you need. Number two, make a plan. Work with your doctors to make a plan and say, this is these are the things that I need to do in order to beat this. And that includes bringing in your people, finding the right resources, planning, say, I need someone I can talk to just informally, because, doctors may scare me or whatever. I just need a person I can talk to. I think the third big thing is, is I'll try to phrase this in a family friendly way. Um, that is, kick some rear end.
Yeah.
You know, get out there and really take your approach to beating your diagnosis with some seriousness. And one of my mottos was always, take no crap, give no ground.
Yeah.
And not that I wasn't taking crap from people. It was that, that the disease was going to make me, the disease was going to, get my heart out of rhythm. And the medications were going to, make me feel different and weird and sometimes tired, and, and just don't let that get in the way of, being successful. And another motto that I've often followed was, I only know one way, and that's forward.
That's right. Yeah. That's it. Man, and we are going to close on that note. Thank you so much, Royce, for being here and for sharing your story and your journey with us, and, just, sharing your wife and daughter and your story with us.
Thanks.
I will make sure to put the cycling for SARC in the show notes so you guys can have direct access to that, and the contact information for Royce, where you can find him on Instagram. That's actually where we connected. And you can, reach out if you got questions, and if you just want to say, hey, I saw the episode and I want to connect. And so that'll be available for you. If you are not yet following the Being Rare podcast, you should be. Go ahead and hit that follow
Yes, you
button.
should.
We actually stream all of our episodes on YouTube, so you can find the video version of this conversation there. Um, yeah. So thank you, Royce, for being here. I appreciate you. Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much, Sarita. I really appreciate it. You're doing a great thing. This is awesome to be here, and so grateful for the opportunity help get out the word about, taking rare diseases seriously and helping people navigate the difficulties of it.
Well, thank you. All right, guys. Until the next one, be rare. Talk to you later. Holla. Peace. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please share it with others, post it on social media, or leave us a comment or review. Stay up to date on current conversations by subscribing to Being Rare wherever you listen to your podcast. Connect with us on social media at Sarita Edwards at the Being Rare Podcast. Until the next episode, be rare.